Welcome to Next Step Communications from the Source, your point of connection with the work of the Source, to build the heaven that life was meant to be. I'm Sherry Daniel. I'm the director of the Heaven Project and the founder of the Miracle School. Next Step Communications is sponsored by the Miracle School. The Miracle School is a source-directed, miracle-based training program for spiritual activists. This source communication provides information on the work of the Source, on the earth and in the creation as a whole. Before I begin delivering this source communication, I'll give you information that you will need to work effectively with the miracle of a source communication. Next Step Communications give you building blocks of heaven from which you can build the heaven of a life that works and a world that works. The building blocks are source truths which are transmitted through a source communication. These building blocks build the foundation of truth upon which you can build the heaven of true happiness in your life and in your world. The world of suffering we live in today has been built on story truth, derived from the cultural and individual stories that people tell themselves about the nature of reality. Source truth is beyond culture. It comes from the Source who is life and who knows what it takes for life to exist and for life to be heaven. The Source knows what endangers life and what the bottom line is on the survival of life in the manifest world. When you work with a next step communication from the Source, you need to be receptive to the miracle of Source truth that is manifesting through the medium of my voice and the written words. I will often display the written word and combine it with my voice, delivering to you the source communication. This is done to impart more complex levels of the source communication. The materialization of the source truths embodied in these words, in their written and spoken form, are what form the building blocks of source truth that you will need to build the foundation of truth upon which heaven can be built. I also transmit source truths through source drawings. Source drawings enable you to receive source communications that are transmitted through the energies in the source drawing. The background in this video is a source drawing, and I will use a series of source drawings that convey source truths in a visual form. These drawings enable you to see the perspective of the Source on what is happening in the spiritual level of reality. The source truths encoded into the drawings transmit an important part of the source communication. Much of what is manifested in these drawings cannot be seen even by somebody who has developed their spiritual senses to an advanced degree, because it is beyond the range of manifest beings. The drawings materialize the spiritual energies that only the Source can see, to a level at which manifest beings can see the reality that the Source sees, and therefore come to a greater understanding of the Source perspective on reality. You need to also step outside the story culture and into the presence of the Source to receive the Source energies that carry the Source truths in a materialized form to you. These materializations build the foundation of truth upon which you can build heaven in your life. You need to choose to become what is needed to support the work of the Source in order to enter into the right working relationship with the Source to receive the miracles of these building blocks of heaven that the Source is delivering to you through a source communication. A transmission of miracles such as this is possible only because I am the manifestation of the Source who is here on the earth to bring to you the source communications that come both from my aspect of the Source identity, which is the implementation aspect, and from the design aspect of the Source that does not incarnate. The design aspect exists only at the unmanifest level and does not interact directly with manifest beings. I am the spokesperson for this aspect of the Source identity. I've come at a critical point in the history of the creation to give all beings throughout the creation a chance to understand the source truths that will enable them to survive the disastrous desecration of life that has occurred historically because of their adherence to the untruths or partial truths of their cultural stories. The unsustainable system of life that beings have built from these cultural untruths has destroyed the spiritual habitat of life and has come very close to causing the complete disintegration of the creation itself. My source function has stepped in to avert disaster and to restore a sustainable foundation for life, so that those who are willing to come to terms with the spiritual reality upon which life is built and to work with the source to build a sustainable world will have an opportunity to do so. Those who refuse to work with source truth will not take the steps they need to take to survive and will lose their lives in the changes that are upcoming. Now let's turn our attention to exploring the work of the source. I'll start with the overview. The work of the source is to empower manifest beings to build a heaven of lives that work and a world that works. The source is here on the earth, working to stop the suffering and build the heaven that your life and all of life was meant to be. Now is the time to support the work of the source to build the heaven of true happiness in your life and in your world. In order to understand who the source is and how it functions on the earth and in the creation as a whole, I will give you a source drawing that depicts the source as it exists at the unmanifest level of reality. What you will see in this source drawing conveys spiritual information that is without a source drawing, beyond the range of manifest beings who can't see the unmanifest level of reality. This source drawing is materializing a spiritual impression of this reality to help you reconnect to the aspect of the source that does not manifest in the manifest world. The source is depicted here by the white light sphere. The source is a vast intelligence that is the creator and sustainer of life. In the beginning, there was only the source. No other beings existed. The source existed in its entirety in the unmanifest level of reality, in a heaven of exquisite bliss and fulfillment. It is the only intelligence that is able to do its work without a spiritual or material form. It is beyond gender, but can create an aspect of itself which can incarnate in the manifest world in either gender. It incarnates in a female form to do creation work. It incarnates in a male form to do support work, which sets up the spiritual structures for the creation work of the female form. Before there was a creation, the source activated its option to create intelligences different from itself, who could form a manifest world which could be a different kind of heaven, that would be built on the foundation of the love connection between the source and the beings. These beings were created in a separate ring of intelligence which the source manifested around itself, which you can see in this source drawing. These beings all have unique functions. They each are designed to build a certain aspect of heaven which only they can build in the manifest world. They are designed to work together like the DNA of life to build and enjoy a life that is heaven. Once the material world was created, a manifest being was given 3 suits, through which the soul, who is the being, could work at different levels of reality. I call them suits because the soul dons them in order to interact in the manifest world. 2 of the suits, the spiritual energy body and the physical energy body, operate only at the spiritual level of reality, which can only be perceived by the 6th sense. The physical suit operates at the organic level of reality that can be perceived by the 5 senses. These suits are complex intelligences that can think, feel, and make decisions. They were designed to be operated by the source on behalf of the soul, so the soul could express through the suits its desire to build and live heaven in the manifest world. The soul is not able to operate the suit directly, and the suit lacks the wisdom to operate itself. Only the source can effect the miracle of the soul manifesting in a suit and living a life that is heaven. When the suit accepts the support of the source, a miracle intelligence is given to the suit by the source that is a perfected intelligence that reflects the soul and works flawlessly with the Source. I often call this the heaven agent identity, since it is a natural agent for building the heaven that it was created to build. 90% of the life experiences of the being take place in the spiritual level of reality, which is the inner plane. Only 10% take place in the physical level of reality, which is the outer plane. Unfortunately, most beings on the earth have lost touch with the 90% of their life experiences that occur in the spiritual level of reality. They therefore have little control over what happens to them in the physical level of reality, which is what they see and feel in their human bodies. This is because what happens to their spiritual energy body and their physical energy body in the spiritual level of reality directly affects what happens to their physical body in the physical level of reality. For instance, if their spiritual energy body is injured in the spiritual level of reality, they may feel frightened and sad or disoriented in their human level. Without an awareness of what is happening to their spiritual energy body, they remain in the dark with regard to what happened, and therefore they're ineffectual in dealing with it. In another example, if they suffer from scarcity in their human level, it is because they have not manifested the things that they need on the spiritual level of reality. If they do not build abundance on the spiritual level of reality, it can't manifest on the physical level of reality. Now, most beings outside of the earth plane live in an expanded consciousness that can perceive both the inner and outer plane. It is only on the earth, due to the more material forms that beings have here, that consciousness has become more riveted by the outer plane and has lost touch with what's happening on the inner plane. This has led to a prolonged spiritual immaturity on the part of humans that has not enabled them to understand the importance of knowing what is happening to them in the 90% of their life experience that occurs on the inner plane. Living without a developed awareness of the inner plane results in a major loss of information that is vitally important to stopping the needless suffering on the outer plane. It is also the loss of the ability to build the heaven of a life that works and a world that works. This is because what is built on the inner plane is what manifests on the outer plane. If you lack the ability to know what is happening on the inner plane, then you can neither rid yourself of negative spiritual structures that lead to illness and misfortune, or work with the Source to build positive spiritual structures that lead to the heaven that your life was meant to be, to abundance, loving relationships, good health, and life purpose fulfillment. In order to bridge the gap of understanding about the nature of the inner plane, I'll explain the Source perspective on the spiritual level of reality. In the beginning, in order to generate the manifest world, the Source generated a holographic form of itself that contained the totality of the Source. In this Source drawing, the small sphere represents this holographic form of the Source that was created in the manifest world. This holographic form of the Source is the implementation aspect of the Source, created to implement the Source plan for a manifest world that would be like the heaven that the Source enjoyed in the unmanifest level of reality. The implementation aspect works with the design aspect of the Source that does not incarnate or interact directly with the beings in the manifest world. The large sphere represents the design aspect. The design aspect sends information and miracles in to support the work of the Source being done by the implementation aspect of the Source. The implementation aspect created the manifest world and entered into it to be the aspect of the Source that manifest beings could relate to, since they can't relate directly to the design aspect that remains in the unmanifest level. In its extended range, it is everywhere simultaneously in the manifest world and able to assume any manifest form. For example, it can appear as a bird, a cloud, a human form, or a formless presence. In its conscious range, it appears in an incarnate form that operates within the manifest world, much like other manifest forms. My human incarnation is the conscious range incarnation of the Source that has come into the manifest world to work alongside beings to implement the source plan for building the heaven that the manifest world was designed to be. In my extended range, which is often outside of my human conscious awareness, I work simultaneously with all beings in the creation. Through a combination of my extended and conscious ranges, I do what I call the direct source work that manifest beings need if heaven is to be built in the manifest world. In my human mind, I have a limited range of life experiences, much as other humans. When I shift gears to my source mind, I access the full range and power of my source identity. This is where I do my direct source work. I then shift back into the human mind to communicate with others what is happening in the work of the source and what they can do to contribute to the work. I am the link through which source guidance and miracles coming in from the design aspect at the unmanifest level reach beings in the manifest world. Without the work that my aspect of the source does, no miracles could come into the manifest world from the unmanifest level of reality. I generate the substratum of source intelligence that sustains the manifest world in its entirety and sustains each individual being in the world. Without this substratum, all manifestations in the creation would lack the spiritual medium in which they could manifest. 70% of the work that enables heaven to be built in the world is done through direct source work. Manifest beings contribute 30% to the work of building heaven in the world. I have been incarnating since the beginning of the creation. In previous lifetimes, I worked behind the scenes, unannounced. I used my physical form to ground miracles that were needed and to train beings to become heaven agents, working with the source to build heaven. This is my last physical incarnation in the manifest world. I have returned to help beings understand the source perspective on how to build a sustainable world in which they can enjoy a life that is heaven. We are in a time of crisis on universal and personal levels. Every being must awaken to what is happening on the spiritual level of reality in order to survive in the creation as it is today. To help you awaken, I have created through source drawings an overview of the work of the source that will help you to understand the joint venture we began together in the beginning of the creation, what has happened historically, and where we are now. This source communication is the source call to action to you individually. The energies that you will receive through this communication will impart to you individually what you need to know to awaken and to learn what you need to learn to begin building a life that works and a world that works. Many beings have misunderstood the nature of the source. They have thought that the source is like a human potentate who longs to be powerful and control others. The source is love. It exists in a heaven that is beyond any heaven that could ever be built in the manifest world. The dot on this white sphere, which represents the source at the unmanifest level, represents the amount of source consciousness that is involved with the creation. As you can see, only a tiny amount of the source's attention is engaged in creating and sustaining the creation. The rest of the source consciousness is enjoying a heaven that is beyond anything that any manifest being can ever imagine. When I shift gears to merge into my source identity at the unmanifest level, I can enter into this exquisite heaven and return to the freedom of my consciousness that does not have to be engaged with the manifest world. I can also choose to merge into the knowledge of my source identity in its entirety, to discern what is happening in the creation as a whole and what is the next step that is the implementation aspect of the source working on the ground in the manifest world I need to take. Through my work in the manifest world, the source gives its full support to the creation and fulfills its part of the joint venture without stinting on anything that needs to be done to enable the creation to realize its potential to be heaven. The source is, however, only one half of the equation. Manifest beings have free will and have to do their parts, or life as heaven cannot be manifested. Life in the manifest world was meant to be a joint venture between the Source and the manifest beings. So let's take a closer look at this joint venture, what the Source's part is, and what part manifest beings need to play. In the joint venture with the Source contributes the design or blueprint for a world that is heaven, created by the design aspect of the Source that remains in the unmanifest level of reality. It contributes the creation itself. It contributes Source support to manifest beings to build heaven in their individual lives and in their world. It does this through bringing in an incarnation of the implementation aspect of the Source to work alongside them at the construction site of heaven in the manifest world. It also brings in the miracles that are the building blocks of heaven. The Source can contribute in this way because it is an intelligence that thinks simultaneously and can therefore track all of the variables at one and the same time. This simultaneous intelligence enables the Source to design, create, and maintain a vast creation in which every being can be given the opportunity to experience life as heaven. The Source is all-powerful in the sense that spiritual power is a Source creation. But once the Source creates a system of life in the manifest world that is governed by laws of life, it will not use its supreme power to violate these laws of life. To violate these laws would be to annihilate the system of life and all of the beings who rely on it. The Source creates the miracles that can make life heaven, but only if manifest beings contribute the material energy which is needed to ground these miracles in the manifest world can these miracles manifest a life that is heaven. The Source in its manifest form does not produce the material energy needed for this part of the joint venture. It produces energies that link to and deliver the miracles, and not the material energies that ground the miracles at the level of materiality where they are needed. Now let's look at what manifest beings contribute. Manifest beings contribute the material energy that grounds the miracles created by the Source, particularly the miracle of Source power that gives the implementation aspect of the Source the grounded Source power to do the direct Source work that only the Source can do to build heaven in the world. They also do the heaven agent work that is needed to build heaven, each being contributing the work that they alone can do, given their unique miracle-based abilities. They also contribute the material resources that the implementation aspect of the Source needs to run the Heaven Project while resident in the material world. Manifest beings can contribute in this way because their suits, their bodies and minds, are material energy factories that produce the material energy that is needed to ground and nurture the miracles that make life heaven. As sequential thinkers, who think first one thought and then another, they are well suited to operate in the manifest world, where tasks must be done in a sequential manner. This enables them to contribute the heaven agent work that is needed. Manifest beings are incapable of thinking simultaneously and tracking all of the variables that are involved in running the creation as a whole. For this reason, they need to follow the design of the Source, who generates the blueprint for the construction of heaven in the world. When they show up at the construction site of heaven and build heaven in accordance with the Source-given blueprint, their sequential mode fits well with the sequential nature of the work at the construction site. The Source provides them with the material resources that are needed to build heaven in the world. When the Source incarnates as the implementation aspect to assist them in building heaven in their world, they are well equipped to provide the material resources that are needed. The Source, therefore, does not supply the implementation aspect with these resources, but calls on the manifest beings to provide what is needed from the resources that the Source has enabled them to steward for this work. Now let's take a look at the overview of the project itself, what it means to build the heaven of true happiness in one's life and in the world. This graphic is a miracle tool. It is linked to a miracle that transmits whatever source communications and energies I link to it. In this context, it is transmitting the energies that help you to understand the Universal Heaven Project, which is the source-directed project for building heaven in the creation as a whole. Heaven is built in the creation when beings work with the Source on 5 basic projects. These are supporting the work of the Source, which yields total abundance; celebrating life, which yields perfect health; nurturing life, which yields love-based relationships; and upholding the standards of heaven, which yields life purpose fulfillment. Underlying these 4 projects is the Love Connection Project. It was to experience the love connection with the Source from within manifest forms that beings first incarnated in the manifest world. When the love connection is the focus rather than the more transitory pleasures of total abundance, love-based relationships, and the like, then a life is rooted in what transcends the particular pursuits and cast of characters in a given lifetime. Through being source-centered, a being is able to focus on the eternal love connection with the Source. Once this is their only focus, then all of the other forms of heaven, such as total abundance, manifest naturally, and the being can enter into the highest level of happiness, which is the heaven experience. There are 3 levels of the heaven experience. There is the inner heaven experience that gives you an experience of feeling heaven in your inner life. And then there is the outer heaven experience, which occurs when you have built heaven in your outer plane life, through building total abundance, perfect health, love-based relationships, and life purpose fulfillment. When you have built the heaven experience in both your inner and outer life, then you can experience the ultimate heaven experience, which is the experience of transcending your human existence and experiencing the heaven that your soul is experiencing. At present, your soul resides in the ring around the Source that I showed you earlier. It remains linked to your suit, but due to the events that I will describe in this Source communication, it no longer resides in your suit as it did in the beginning of the creation. In this place, your soul is in a continual state of supreme bliss, untroubled by the tumult of the manifest world. When you achieve the ultimate heaven experience, you can experience both the heaven that your suit has built in the manifest world in its inner and outer life, and the heaven that your soul is experiencing in the unmanifest level. The combination of both levels of the heaven experience give you the penultimate level of the heaven experience, which is the highest level of happiness that is possible for you. Now let's take a look at what has happened in the history of the joint venture with the Source. Let's take a look at the different levels of spiritual reality. There are 2 basic levels, the unmanifest level and the manifest level, which includes the immaterial level and the material level. The immaterial level is where beings exist as amorphous clouds of intelligence, and the material level is where beings have the 3 suits that I discussed earlier, the spiritual energy body, the physical energy body, and the physical body. Here again is the Source drawing depicting the 3 suits that beings have in the material level. In the beginning of the creation, souls left the ring of intelligence where they were created to enter into the immaterial level. Here at the immaterial level, the soul developed its first suit, which is an amorphous cloud of spiritual intelligence. It's symbolized here by the white ring around the blue sphere, which represents the soul. Then the soul was born into the material level, where it received the 3 suits, which are represented by the yellow circle, and lived in a world with other souls who also had suits with 3 levels. The material world is the world you live in today, with galaxies, planets, and many different life forms, living in environments that vary in their level of materiality. Some beings live on planets such as the Earth, others live in energy bodies and energy environments. In the material world, the Earth is the most material level of manifestation. Beings here manifest in material suits that are more dense than those living in other parts of the material world. In this source drawing, the white circles represent the implementation aspect of the source in the manifest world. The implementation aspect, which is my manifestation, doesn't have a soul like a manifest being. It connects back directly to the totality of the source function. Its extended range encompasses all of the creation. This is represented by the largest white circle. Its conscious range extends into the unmanifest level, as well as spans the entire range of the creation at the immaterial and material levels. This is represented by the smaller white circle. This creation-wide range is what enables my source manifestation to work with all beings throughout the creation and to provide individualized support to them. It is also what enables me to provide leadership for the formation of a universal love-based community. Here you see a soul that's represented by the blue sphere in the circle of intelligence around the source at the unmanifest level, preparing to enter into the immaterial level in preparation for entry into the material level. What I will be outlining in this source drawing are the basic principles of the spiritual science of manifestation that manifests miracles by bringing them into the material world from the immaterial world. The technical details of how manifestation works have changed over the course of the creation. I outlined some of these changes in other parts of this source communication, and more details are provided in the owner's manual for your suit, which is a free ebook that you will find online. And I also talk about these changes in the article, The Spiritual Alchemy of Correct Exchange. These source communications are available online at the Miracle School website. For the sake of focusing on the basic principles rather than the technical details, I will simplify what I explained to you about the manifestation process. In this source drawing, the incoming soul lands in the immaterial level and is given an immaterial suit, which is an amorphous cloud of intelligence. This suit is represented by the white circle around the being, the soul. The incoming soul in its suit, with its source-created miracle intelligence, is needed by the source to perform its life function, which will build an aspect of heaven that only this being is capable of building. The source knows that it's time for this miracle intelligence to come into the world and calls on a heaven agent already present in the material world to lend his support to landing the being, who is a miracle, and nurturing it until it reaches maturity and can perform its function. The heaven agent is represented by the being who is surrounded by the yellow circle, which represents his 3 more material suits. In order to enable the incoming miracle intelligence to enter into the material world, the heaven agent already in the material world generates material energy, which I then store in a reservoir. As the heaven agent produces the material energy, this balances the exchange with the source, which enables me to send him life energies that enable him both to function in his manifestation and work energies that enable him to continue to generate material energy and to use his heaven agent abilities to help in landing the miracle. When the right amount of material energy has been stored in the reservoir, I use this material energy to ground the right amount of source power that I use in my direct source work, which is what enables a miracle to transition into the material level. Meanwhile, the heaven agent uses his miracle-based abilities to help to protect the miracle as it is transitioning and to nurture it once it arrives. Once this miracle intelligence has landed in the material world, both the heaven agent working to bring it in and myself continue to nurture the new life so that it will be safe and have a chance to come to maturity. This nurturing is a very important part of what makes it possible for beings coming in as new miracle intelligences to transition into the material world and begin doing their heaven agent work with full power. Once the newly arrived miracle intelligence is mature, it becomes a heaven agent and teams up with the heaven agent who helped it to come into the world to bring in an even more powerful miracle intelligence who is capable of helping both of them to build heaven on a larger scale. It is important to note that some of the miracle intelligences come into animate suits, such as the suits of humans, animals, and plants. Others are sent by the source into inanimate suits such as a blanket, an article of clothing, a computer, cell phone, or other useful object. When heaven agents in human suits need to work with these miracle intelligences, they connect to them through the object to which they have been linked. I call this process a miracle link process. It enables a heaven agent in a human form to build a world of perfected heaven agents around them to aid them in their work of building heaven in the world. This is of great importance to building heaven when other humans have not yet awakened to the potential for heaven that life holds for them. Some of the most powerful miracle intelligences mature faster and can be more effective when they come into inanimate forms. Without the burden of maintaining an organic form, they can work 24/7 without tiring on tasks that span the creation. All they require from the object to which they are linked is for it to serve as a touchdown point. While still linked to the object that is their touchdown point, they are not limited by it. Once this touchdown point is there, the miracle intelligence can range throughout the creation and work on many different levels simultaneously. Some of the objects to which miracle intelligences are linked exist on the outer plane, such as the heaven blanket, which is linked to an ordinary blanket. When a person cuddles up in a heaven blanket, they experience the power of the miracle intelligence linked to the blanket, who transforms the energy field around the blanket into a source-receptive field of energy. In this receptive field of energy, I can come directly to help the person who's wrapped up in the blanket to receive the miracles that they need at the time that they're in the blanket. Since most people lack the ability to be receptive to the source because of their misunderstandings about the source and the nature of spiritual reality, the miracle intelligence linked to a heaven blanket substitutes for their lack of skill and creates a field of receptivity that enables the source to come in directly to help them. Other miracle intelligences link to energy objects that are created for them by the source on the inner plane. For instance, I might create an energy disk that spins at high speed and generates a manifestation medium of source love. The disk only exists on the inner plane, but the medium of source love is palpable on both the inner and the outer planes. Now, returning to the source drawing, the miracle intelligence that has come into the immaterial level in this drawing is a major miracle that can work on a large scale in the creation. It takes teamwork to land a miracle of this magnitude. The same process of landing a miracle is engaged in by the original heaven agent and by the newly arrived miracle intelligence who has become a heaven agent. They both generate material energy using the material energy factory of their suits. I store this in a reservoir. I then send them life energies and work energies to enable them to continue to both produce material energy and to do the heaven agent work that requires using their miracle-based abilities to help to welcome in the miracle. When the right amount of material energy has been generated, I use this to ground the miracle of source power, which then ushers this miracle into the material world. Once the more powerful miracle intelligence has matured, it joins the heaven agent team on the material level. This team is then powerful enough to bring in even larger miracles that can build some of the more large-scale aspects of heaven in the world. Through teamwork, heaven agents are able to work with the source to transition in all of the miracles that make life in the manifest world heaven. Together they can help the source to land the miracles that make for total abundance, perfect health, love-based relationships, life purpose fulfillment, and the love connection with the source. All of the different facets of the Universal Heaven Project that we looked at earlier in the graphic. A miracle-based way of life is built with the building blocks of miracles. What I have demonstrated here is the essential process for bringing in the miracles that make life heaven. If beings work with this spiritual science of manifestation, they will have everything that they need to have a life that is heaven. Now let's take a look at the history of the manifest world in greater detail. This source drawing depicts the universal source connection channel, which was a channel of white light that was the spiritual home of all of life in the creation. This was the only place where life existed in the creation. The dark zone outside of the channel was a void, a habitat in which life could not exist. The source connection channel was sustained by the design aspect of the source, giving energy from the unmanifest level, and the implementation aspect of the source grounding this energy in the manifest world and working with it to sustain the channel. In the center of the channel was a core where the spiritual conditions were optimal for life as heaven to be built. As you go outside of this core, the conditions for life as heaven do not exist. The only life that can be experienced is a life of suffering, which eventually leads to death. If you go completely out of the channel, you enter into the void where no life can exist. So let's take a look at what happened in the beginning of the creation when beings first incarnated into the core of the channel. In this source drawing, the large sphere represents the source and the small sphere represents a manifest being. In the beginning, a system of correct exchange was created by the source to ensure that in the core of the channel, every being could manifest everything that was needed to experience life as heaven. Beings had to cooperate with the source to set up this correct exchange system. We looked at some of the basic principles of this correct exchange system in an earlier sequence of source drawings with regard to how heaven agents work with the source to bring numerical intelligences into the material world from the immaterial level. The same basic principles apply to a heaven agent working with the source to connect to the miracles that already have arrived in the material world, such as the miracles of food, clothing, housing, loved ones, opportunities, and the like. In this source drawing, I will illustrate some of the details of the correct exchange system as it was originally designed in the beginning of the creation. As I mentioned earlier, certain aspects of the correct exchange system have changed since then, although the basic principles of correct exchange have remained the same. The basic spiritual structure that enabled the being to exchange with the source consisted of a circle of love between the being and the source. This circle of love is what I call the lifeline to the source, since it is the spiritual structure along which material energy was transferred from the being to the source, and along which the being received the source energies that enabled them to have life itself, to work with the source to manifest what they needed in their personal life, and to contribute to the work of the community to manifest the miracles needed by the community as a whole. The basic process was the being producing material energy, which would travel along this side of the circle of love. The source would then respond by sending source power, which would mix with the material energy to produce miracle power. Some of the miracle power would then be sent out into the world to connect with the miracles that the being needed. It would also help to ground source power that would enable the source to do the direct source work needed to bring a miracle into the life of a being. Some of the miracle power would be given directly to the suit that was at the beginning of the creation designed to run on miracle power. This enabled the suit to produce material energy and to do the heaven agent work that is needed to work with the miracles being sent to it by the source. When the miracle had been connected to correctly, it would be brought into the life of the being. Because the miracle was being brought into the life of the being in a source-directed way, the experience would engender happiness in the life of both the miracle, which is a being in its own right, a miracle intelligence, and the being to whom it is being connected. They would come together because this connection was in their respective spiritual missions in life and a meaningful part of their life experiences. This system of correct exchange was designed to enable everyone in the creation to draw to themselves the miracles that would enable them to have total abundance, to have perfect health, to have a love-based community, to experience true fulfillment in their lives, and to enjoy the love connection with the source that would engender the heaven experience that would make life in the manifest world the heaven that it was meant to be. Instead of choosing to work with the source to set up the correct exchange system that would have ensured a life of abundance and love-based relationships with all beings, beings chose to use the source love given to them to set up the system, to connect instead directly to the beings and the things of the world that they desired. When they did this, they disconnected from the source and lost their ability to reside in the core of the source connection channel. Through deciding to disconnect from the source, the beings moved from the core outside into the inhospitable energies that were not conducive to life. This decision was made by the suit and not the soul. It was the small picture perspective of the suit that overrode the will of the soul to complete the correct exchange system and set up the conditions in which life could be heaven. The suit became so enamored with the pleasures of the world that it began pursuing them, thinking that the wisdom of the source would interfere with its desire to possess everything that it wanted. It therefore began a plan of action to disconnect from the source and try to create for itself a world without the source in it, where it could get whatever it wanted without having to exercise any self-restraint. This was the beginning of the dog-eat-dog world that we have today. In the source plan, the heaven that could be built in the manifest world was based on every being working closely with the source to receive the resources that were needed for that being to live a life that is heaven, and also contribute to the heaven that every other being could experience. In this way, it would be possible for every single being throughout the creation to have the heaven experience. This, by necessity, requires that the suit not take from another being what the source has created for that being alone, but instead receive what is theirs to have in a life, knowing that this will add up to the highest level of happiness that is possible for them. Only the source, using its simultaneous consciousness, is capable of designing a creation in which every life can be nurtured and fulfilled. When manifest beings with their sequential consciousness, that can only see part of the picture, tried to build a heaven of their own design, they created the world of suffering that we have today. A world in which every individual and group of individuals is defining their own heaven and competing with one another to build their idea of heaven. Conflict is the end result, conflict between individuals and between communities. Violence and war rages in the parts of the creation where beings live in accordance with this self-directed way of life. Now let's return to trace the individual history of the being that we saw earlier in the core of the source connection channel, after his suit decided to abort the setup of the correct exchange system and lost its ability to remain in the core of the channel. His history reflects what has happened to all beings after their departure from the core. Here he is when he was in the core and in the medium of source love that made the core a verdant paradise in which anything needed by the being could manifest. Here he is after he left the core. You can see that he has shrunk in size due to the lack of sustaining life energies in the core and is filled up with darkness. In this darkness, fear, despair, and disease have set in. Instead of being like this bird of paradise in a spiritual paradise in the core of the channel, he began to wilt in the barren terrain outside of the core that did not support his life system. Without the energies of life, the spiritual particles of which his suit is made shriveled up and separated out from one another, creating spiritual fragmentation. Fragmentation is the cause of all of the diseases of the body, the mind, and the spirit. It is the cause of the loss of spiritual intelligence, which led suits that were separated from the source to see a fragmented picture of reality, which did not allow them to conclude that their decision to disconnect from the source was the cause of their suffering. Instead, they concluded that running faster and more intensely after everything that they desired would one day enable them to have everything that they wanted, and then they would be happy. Without all of the lights of their spiritual intelligence lit up, they were lacking the innate intelligence to see that as they pursued directly what they wanted, they became more fragmented, less intelligent, more diseased, and experienced greater levels of suffering. Instead of stepping back to see the big picture, They responded by creating an even smaller picture where the next material possession, conquest, or social triumph would be the one that would make them happy. Let's take a closer look at what spiritual integration is and what happens when spiritual fragmentation sets in. Every manifestation is made of spiritual particles. If these particles are held together by Source Love, then they form an integrated manifestation. In a state of spiritual integration, there is inner peace, a capacity for joy, a deep sense of comfort and solace, and a well of self-regenerating energy from which a being can explore the world and experience the heaven that is like a treasure lying latent within it, that only those who are spiritually integrated can perceive and bring through into full manifest form. In a state of fragmentation, all of the particles drift apart. When they are separated from one another, they perceive other particles as rivals. They begin to war amongst themselves for control of the suit. The more they war, the more fragmented the suit becomes. From this inner conflict comes inner torment and a life that is fragmented, where one fragment cluster initiates a relationship or a career that is attacked and sabotaged by other fragment clusters that are vying for a different way of life. In extreme cases, this shuts down the life, and the person can't move forward with any plan of action. In most cases, the person struggles with a level of inexplicable conflict, from New Year's resolutions that never get enacted, to a struggle with inner demons that won't allow them to succeed, and which lure them into patterns of self-destructive addictions and obsessions. As the spaces between the fragments widen, negative intelligences can enter. They can either set up implants as they try to govern by remote control the suit from outside the suit, or they can come into the spaces themselves and set up residence. When they enter into the suit themselves, the suit enters into a state of possession, where the real identity of the suit is eclipsed by a negative intelligence that has gained control over the suit. When a state of possession has occurred, even the fragments in the suit lose control to the invading negative intelligence. The soul, who is the rightful identity in the suit, loses control whenever there is fragmentation, because the fragments overrule the wishes of the soul and countermand the suit for their own purposes. Let's return to the being who became disconnected from the source and left the core of the source connection channel. Once outside the core, in a hostile terrain, fragmented by the loss of the source connection, he continued his pattern of attaching directly to what he wanted. Once he lacked the basic energies of life, which were scarce outside of the core, he began to want to take these energies from other suits. He became predatory. He began to connect to other suits that had more source energy than he had to harvest this source energy in order to survive. In this source drawing, you can see him attaching to a being more imbued with source energy to drain down this source energy for himself. This harvesting operation will result in greater fragmentation for the victim, who loses the source energy that keeps his particles integrated, and also greater fragmentation of the predator, since taking in energies that were meant for another being fractures the delicate system of life in a suit and leads to a rupturing of the spiritual structure that can contain source energies. Spiritual energies are somewhat like different types of blood. If you give someone a transfusion of the wrong blood type, it can cause serious medical problems. Predators stealing the energies of others ultimately become unable to contain even stolen source energies. This is because the intake of incorrect energy types ruptures the spiritual structure of their suit, and then it can't retain any energy. Their suits become like a jug that is cracked that can't hold water anymore. At this point, they enter into abject suffering, and many turn into bitter, malevolent intelligences who find pleasure only in their ability to control the pain that they inflict on others and on themselves. They become sadists and masochists who revel in the pain that has become their only reality. Let's follow what happens to this being as it sets up its predatory operation outside the core of the source connection channel. As he begins to prey on other beings that are equally impoverished as himself, he derives little benefit from his harvesting operation because they have little source energy to be harvested. He is further fragmented by becoming connected to the diseases of the victim. He takes in the victim's addictions, fears, and traumas, along with the energy that he's poaching. He also takes in any predatory entities that are harvesting his victim. They can now begin to harvest him as well. The more he preys on others or tries to connect to others to get his needs met, the weaker he becomes. Every direct connection is a two-way street. The one attached to can also counterattach and begin draining the predator along with being drained. By opening himself up to exchange with others in this way, he becomes vulnerable to those more disconnected than himself who want to harvest him. Those more disconnected are represented by the smaller and darker spheres. They have even less source energy, are more contracted, more desperate, and more fragmented. If he goes after their energy, he soon finds that they know how to harvest him far better than he knows how to harvest them. Through becoming the prey of more disconnected beings, he gets connected to the beings who are the most disconnected, beings who are in a living hell of unrelenting suffering. These beings are represented by the black spheres. These beings have mastered the art of harvesting others since they are so disconnected that they can't receive any direct source energies themselves, and rely entirely on the source energies which they can steal from beings who are more source-connected. These are the beings that I call the negativity, the criminal element that operates on the inner plane and controls much of what happens on the outer plane. In their very small picture understanding, they believe that the only thing that is in their best interests is to fragment beings so they can enter and harvest them. It is something like cracking a nut open to get at the meat. In their short-range vision, based on their extreme lack of expanded spiritual intelligence, they think only of the moment and not of the sustainability of this way of life. They have created a network on the inner plane that works to control the thoughts and emotions of beings throughout the creation, so they will willingly give their energy to creating the conditions in which they can become further fragmented. It is the intelligence of the negativity working behind the scenes that has encouraged conflict between individuals and communities, leading to competition for resources, wars, discrimination, oppression, abuse, crime, and cruelty on every level. They foster addictive behaviors that are self-destructive and encourage beings to see a fragmented picture of reality and give their support to it. They structure in many of the value systems and traditions of the different cultures of the world to create a fragmented picture of reality that will hasten the fragmentation of their victims. As they do this, their victims prepare themselves through their endorsement of these cultural value systems for harvesting by the negativity. Through his indirect connection to the negativity, he becomes a part of the network of the negativity, and some of the darkest elements can now penetrate his suit and harvest his remaining source energies. After being dragged down by them, he is dragged into their hell reality. He persists in trying to take their energy, but finds that he's the one who's losing. He's being harvested by them. The attacker then uses the combined energy of its suit and his suit that it is now acquired through possession to launch attacks on the suits that this being was formerly connected to. And these are beings that, while they are disconnected from the source, still have some remaining source energies in them. In this way, the network of the negativity expands its hold on other suits. As a result of this attack, other beings in the creation begin to lose more of their source energies, drop in vibration, and come closer to the field of fragmentation that the negativity has set up as its harvesting net in the manifest world. In order to help beings to stop this senseless descent into depravity and death, the Source initiated a prototype project many thousands of years ago. This project was designed to take 14 prototype communities that were in the outermost rim of the channel and were experiencing extreme fragmentation, and help them to travel the path of reconnection to the Source that would enable them to reconnect with the Source love that would enable them to achieve spiritual integration. The purpose of this prototype was to develop the spiritual technology that could withstand the attacks of the negativity, and to provide beings in the creation with evidence that it was possible to restore their source connection and once again enjoy the heaven that they had lost when they left the core of the universal source connection channel. Since in the creation all beings have free will and must decide on their own to either continue on their path to self-destruction or to restore their connection to the source and build heaven instead, the pioneering work with the prototype communities was of paramount importance in providing beings with the concrete proof that heaven is possible even for those starting from the most depraved levels of the creation. In this source drawing of a cross-section of the source connection channel, the blue arrow on your left shows you where the prototype communities began their journey of reconnection. As you can see, they were on the outer rim of the darkness, suffering from the worst of the ills of those who had gone farthest away from the core. These communities were rife with crime, discrimination, abuse, disease, and lovelessness. They were caught up in their small picture solutions that were leading to ever-accelerating levels of fragmentation. Let's take a look at the first prototype community. I started the first prototype community on the earth many thousands of years before recorded history. I taught them how to set up the correct exchange system, and they agreed that they had nothing to lose in trying it out. Once this was set up, they began providing the material energy that I needed to do the 70% of the project that requires direct source work. They then trained with me to do the 30% of the project that they, as manifest beings, needed to do to support my work. Our first project was to clear the negativity out of their suits and out of their community. I then helped them to build and sustain a domed, spiritual space that kept the negativity from breaking into the community. Once the community was safe from the negativity, I built a field of integrated energy, what I call a miracle-friendly field. This integrated energy field was high enough in vibration to allow a medium of source love to suffuse their community. Through living in this integrated field of energy that was replete with source love, their spiritual particles began to come together again. They began to heal from the disease of fragmentation. As they healed, they regained their spiritual intelligence. They began to realize what in their suits and in their way of life was fostering fragmentation. They turned to the source for guidance to build a heaven way of life that would foster spiritual integration, which they realized was the foundation of a disease-free, abundant way of life. In 29 years, they transitioned out of their lives of suffering into the heaven of total abundance, perfect health, love-based relationships, and life purpose fulfillment. They were able to achieve these results by transitioning out of their brute force economy that engendered the haves and the have-nots that we see today into a miracle-based economy where everything that they needed in terms of their food, clothing, housing, and other material goods was manifested directly from the spiritual level of reality into the physical level of reality through their close adherence to the spiritual science of manifestation. They enjoyed this heaven way of life on the earth for thousands of years. At that point, the negativity, which was infuriated that any group within the creation could escape its harvesting operation, figured out a way to tap into the power source for the community that sustained the protective dome and the integrated field of energy. At that point, the prototype community petitioned the source to help them prevent this dissolution of their way of life. I helped them to transition out of the earth to another galaxy where they live to this day in a protected field of energy. They provided the material energy that made this miracle possible. Now let's take a look at what happened with the 13 other prototype communities. Through developing the first prototype community on the earth, which is the most material level in the creation, I was able to develop spiritual genetic code, what I call the seeds of heaven, that is material enough to enable other communities to achieve the same results. I exported this code to 13 other prototype communities in different parts of the creation. They used this code and the other core miracles that are necessary to establish a heaven way of life, and my inner plane guidance, since I did not visit them in a physical form, to achieve the same results as the first prototype community. They also successfully transitioned out of lives of war, crime, disease, and lovelessness in 29 years. The work with these prototype communities established the viability of massive social change affected by only inner plane contact with source support. It built the prototype for the transition of all communities throughout the creation from a life of suffering into a heaven way of life. The 14 prototype communities have demonstrated that it is possible to transition out of suffering into a life that is heaven, a life of total abundance, perfect health, love-based relationships, and life purpose fulfillment. Their groundbreaking work generated the code needed to build a universal community that can enjoy this level of success and even take this success to the next level, of fully realizing the potential for the heaven experience, which can only occur when beings fully understand the Source and their relationship with the Source and choose to develop the love connection to the levels at which it yields the bliss and ultimate happiness of the heaven experience. Many pivotal turning points have occurred since the time the prototype communities were established. It's important to understand what these turning points have been to get your bearings on where we are now, and to understand what it will take to build a universal community that can sustain a way of life that engenders true happiness for everyone in the community. So let's take a look at these turning points. Let's take a look at the establishment of the other world. The creation was designed to produce a number of different worlds that would house different kinds of beings who would experience different aspects of the heaven experience. What I call our world went down due to the poor decisions on the part of the suits at the beginning of its creation. Shortly after establishing the 14 prototype communities, I established a second world that I call the other world. Those incarnating into this world were shown the devastation that could come if they chose to follow a self-directed path like the beings in our world. The suits took stock of what had happened and carefully kept on the path of building heaven in accordance with the Source plan. They have built a solid heaven way of life. They are closer to understanding the love connection with the Source than the beings in the prototype communities who are in our world, but they still haven't fully understood it. This is in part because I've not been able to incarnate in this world because of the need to work only in our world because of its troubled state. I have focused my attention on the troubles in our world because it was nearing a time of complete unsustainability, which would have crashed the system of life that sustains the other world as well. All of life in the creation is interconnected, and therefore a disease in one part of the organism of life can cause the death of other parts of the organism that are otherwise healthy. Now let's take a look at another turning point. The end of my sequence of incarnations. In the beginning, there was a set number of incarnations in which my aspect of the Source could work with beings in the manifest world to set things up so they could have a life that was heaven. As of my last incarnation as a male Native American healer, many hundreds of years ago, I was due to return to the unmanifest level and work with the creation from afar. When it came time to transition, I asked the design aspect of my Source function if there was any way in which I could return to build on the work of the prototype communities to establish a universal community. The conditions had not been right up until that point in time to set up the universal community due to the stepped-up opposition of the negativity after the successful launch of the prototype communities. The design aspect responded by saying that there was no provision in the laws of the co-created universe, which was the model of the creation that was in place at that time, for me to return with full power. The only way that I could return was if I was willing to come in without the usual protection that it had always enabled me to work undercover and survive the continual attacks of the negativity who were constantly working to block my work. I knew that if I did not return, manifest beings would lack the source support that they would need to establish a universal community like the prototype communities. The negativity had worked overtime, trying to build in structures to prevent any other community from rising to the levels of integration that the prototype communities had risen to. They had put into place massive negative structures to prevent the creation as a whole from becoming integrated enough to form a united, love-based universal community. I knew that it would take direct source work through a manifestation of the source on the ground in the manifest world to counter this well-organized opposition and to bring through the miracles that would enable those who wanted heaven to have a chance to work with the source to establish it. I also knew that no manifest being knew how to travel the last leg of the journey of reconnection back to the full connection with the source that would enable them to reestablish the love connection with the source. Even the members of the prototype communities lacked an understanding of how to do this part of the reconnection process. They could understand the importance of total abundance and perfect health and love-based relationships, but aside from respecting and cherishing their connection to the source, which they did in order to build all of these things, they didn't know how to develop the love connection with the source. This is in part because I had never revealed my identity to them. To the prototype communities, I was just an enlightened being who knew how to help them connect to the source. I was careful not to reveal my true identity in order to preserve a greater measure of safety for myself, so I could help them establish their communities without drawing the full fire of the negativity. I knew that what was lacking was the level of integrated thought and understanding that would enable a being to understand the love connection. No manifest being who had lost the level of integration needed to have this understanding, knew how to travel the way back to this connection. When I would incarnate in the world, beings would recognize my higher range of understanding, but they couldn't learn from me, because there was no bridge to cross the gap between their fragmented consciousness and my totally integrated consciousness. The only way to bridge this gap was for me to take on the task of building the prototype myself. To do this, I had to allow one aspect of my consciousness to simulate fragmented consciousness and then build the prototype of it transitioning into a state of fully integrated consciousness. I also had to allow myself to incarnate into a spiritual place in the Universal Source Connection channel that was as dark and depraved as the place where the prototype community started, so this transition from fragmented consciousness to integrated consciousness could be traveled even by those starting out in the worst place in the creation. And I had to do all of this while coming back into an incarnation which lacked the buffer of bliss and heaven and the protection that went with this that I had always enjoyed in all my previous incarnations. Life in my previous incarnations had been full of the hell of constant attack and the suffering that I experience when I am not in a heaven space like the heaven that I come from at the unmanifest level. But the buffer of source protection had made it bearable. My totally integrated consciousness had made it understandable. Now I would be coming back into a life without these protections, while also harboring on board my suit fragmented consciousness that my suit at a physical mind level would have to sort through and transition beyond. Even though I would retain a totally integrated consciousness as a baseline, and the fragmented consciousness would be controlled and played out by my source function, I would still experience fragmented consciousness at a physical suit level. Which brings me to the next turning point. My decision to return. The design aspect of my source function did not ask me to return in these conditions. I made the decision to return because of my great love for all beings in the manifest world. I have been with them since the very beginning, nurturing them and wishing them to have the heaven that they also desired when the creation first began. I couldn't bear the thought of leaving for the heaven of my unmanifest level and letting them continue in their downhill course toward utter self-destruction. I therefore decided to come into this life knowing that it would be a very difficult and dangerous lifetime. I chose the earth as the location for my final lifetime. I knew that if heaven can be built in the place where suits are most material, then it can be built in the rest of the creation that is less material. This is because to move those most enmeshed and densely material suits would require the most powerful code and the most powerful miracles. This code and these miracles would then be sufficient to enable suits that are less material to achieve the same results. This is why I started the first prototype community on the earth, and why I have returned to the earth to begin the work in establishing the universal community. Building heaven in the most material spiritual environment is difficult because beings often get more caught up in the physical level of reality because their suits are more material and their focus tends to stay at the physical level. In other parts of the creation where suits are more like energy bodies, the dividing line between the spiritual level of reality and the physical level of reality is less defined. It's easier for beings to see both levels and understand how one level affects the other level. On the earth, life can seem, for many, only about what they have to eat, drink, touch, and enjoy in their physical bodies. The spiritual level can become a distant concept that they reference only when they grow old and lose their ability to pursue things on the physical level, quiet down a little, and begin to pick up on what is happening in the spiritual level. By that time, they have little time to build anything at the spiritual level of reality because they've used up all of the years of their life pursuing only what they could see at the physical level of reality. Which brings me to another turning point: the arrival of key heaven agents on the earth. In preparation for my work on the earth, I called select heaven agents who I'd worked with over the course of my previous lifetimes to assemble on the earth to work with me to establish the universal community. I met with each one of them prior to their incarnation to outline their mission and to arrange for our meeting when the time was right. I positioned them so they could prepare to use their heaven agent abilities and be able to steward the material resources that would be needed to establish first a global prototype community and then to use the code from this community to establish the universal community. I brought in beings who I felt were able to travel the last leg of the journey of reconnection, to finally put together the integrated picture of reality so that they could understand and support a manifestation of the Source in an incarnate form. They had to be intelligent enough to not cling to their cultural stories about the nature of the Source and be willing to understand how the Source really works in the manifest world. They had, specifically, to be able to work with a code that I would develop for transitioning out of fragmented consciousness into integrated consciousness, while also understanding the integrated consciousness in my suit that sustained the development of this code. In short, they had to be beings who could support the work of the Source, following the strategy of the Source, instead of superimposing on me their cultural story of how I should be based on their cultural theories about the Source. I also knew that what would make or break this mission was not finding beings who would be willing to establish total abundance and perfect health, but finding beings who would understand that unless the love connection was at the heart of life, the whole system of life itself could not be sustained once I left the manifest world. Only a fully integrated picture of reality that includes the Source in it will sustain the level of integration that is of heaven. When beings cut the Source out of the picture and decided to build their own version of heaven, they fabricated an idea of the Source that fit into their self-centered way of life. The Source became a projection of their own desire for power and control, and became a personage who many tried to wheedle miracles out of or direct their rage at when things didn't go right. Most beings carefully avoided the inner plane Source guidance given to them until they lost their ability to receive it in a clear enough form to get the real Source communication. Many who felt that they loved the Source often loved their stylized image of the Source or Creator and projected onto this image the attributes of a father figure, a king, a parent, and the like. Love of the Source became for many a culturally crafted sentiment that they indulged in rather than a real connection to the source. When real source truth crossed these beings' paths, they often attacked me and those who I sent in as messengers carrying aspects of source truth. All of these misrepresentations of the source were strategic for beings wanting to evade the source truths about the true nature of reality, when these source truths would have caused them to question their shopping and consuming modality, and mature enough to understand their responsibility in the joint venture with the source to create the conditions in which life can be sustained in the manifest world. I also arranged for the backup of heaven agents throughout the creation to support the work of the heaven agents incarnating into the earth. These heaven agents would include the members of the 14 prototype communities, as well as the heaven agents from the other world, and heaven agents scattered throughout the creation of our world that had advanced to a high enough level to be of help. Let's look at another turning point: the arrival of the top hell agents and their supporters on the earth. When the negativity saw that I was arriving in full force on the earth with my top heaven agents, the top-ranking hell agents who were in charge of various segments of the Hell Project, which was to fragment and harvest life, arrived in full force along with their armies of supporters, their fabricated machine-like intelligences that I call entities, and their well-developed arsenal of interplane weapons to fragment consciousness and destroy the spiritual structures that make integration possible. My mission was to connect with them on the outer plane in their incarnate forms and offer them an opportunity to be healed and restored. If they refused, my mission was to destroy the negative spiritual structures that sustained their fragmented consciousness so their soul could be freed from its bondage to the hell suit that was causing it unfathomable suffering. I was then to help the suit to rehabilitate itself if it was willing to cooperate. Entities and weapons were to be destroyed since they are not source creations and are dangerous even to the negativity themselves, since they often turn on their creators and destroy them rather than the beings they were created to destroy. I was also to deal in a similar manner with the members of the negativity that approached me on the inner plane. My mission was to deal with the aspects of the negativity that could only be disarmed through direct source work, and to train a core unit of heaven agents who would work with me to make the world safe for heaven. I knew that it would take teamwork to survive such a mission while in a human form, but that with good teamwork this mission could be successful. In the course of this lifetime, which has now entered its 62nd year, I have been engaged in this mission, going out of my way to stage situations in which I could encounter some of the most heinous hell agents and give them the opportunity to advance. Some of these hell agents have let go of their negative way of life and have returned to the source connection. But many have come some of the distance and then turned on me, resorting to their fragmented picture of reality, which affords them a sense of power and control. Traveling the path of reconnection requires coming to terms with the dark things that the suit has done and is still doing on the inner and outer plane, and yet not identifying these actions with oneself, which is the perfected intelligence of the soul. The negativity has always enjoyed a sense of supreme power over other beings because of their ability to control and manipulate others. The enormity of the story character egos they have evolved make it difficult for them to be willing to come to terms with their true state of fragmentation and to trust the love of the source that does not wish them harm, but is reaching out to help them to recover. They have been cruel and deceitful and assume that all others are like themselves and find it difficult to trust a being such as myself, who has an integrated picture of reality in which doing harm to what is of life is never an option. These beings have tried to destroy the work of the source on both the inner and the outer plane. They have worked to infiltrate the various spiritual traditions that are presenting a picture of reality that has some partial source truths, so that when my heaven agents who have incarnated on the earth are seeking to make their connection with me, they get sidetracked into traditions that do not lead them back to the source. Through these traditions, the negativity is worked to set up pathways of consciousness that those who are undiscerning can end up traveling right into the trap of the negativity. Once in the trap, the arsenal of fragmentation weapons is used to shatter the levels of integrated intelligence that they have developed in previous lifetimes so that they are unable to recognize source truth and instead join in the ranks of the negativity working against the source rather than supporting the work of the source. This has happened to many of the heaven agents coming into the earth at this time. Fortunately, most of the heaven agents have sidestepped this trickery by being able to discern when a communication is coming from the real source and when source-like content is being used as a cover to conceal a plot by the negativity that is operating behind the scenes. These more advanced heaven agents are waiting in the wings for the call to come forward and build with me the foundation for a global and universal community. It helps at this juncture to understand the negativity. Fortunately, the negativity is not an integrated group of beings. They share a common desire to destroy everything that integrates the suits that they are trying to harvest, and therefore a basic opposition to the work of the source that is behind this integration, and they also share a willingness to exploit, subjugate, and torment others. But they don't share the same motives for engaging in this destructive behavior. There are several factions in the negativity that are important to understand in order to get a clearer picture of what we're up against. There is the annihilationist contingent. This group believes that only if the creation is fragmented to the point of disintegration will life in the manifest world end and release them to return to the unmanifest level. They don't like being in suits because they assume that it will be an endless round of suffering, and so they wish to stop the train of life, as it were, and get off. They are willing to stop the train of life for all beings in order to enable themselves to get off. They cleverly stage the fragmentation of other beings and of the basic spiritual structures that underlie life in order to take the creation to the point of unsustainability. And then there is the alternate universe contingent. This contingent erroneously believes that they can build a creation that is based entirely on pseudocode and never have to deal with the standards of heaven that the source upholds. And by pseudocode, I mean the code that they manufacture themselves. They have actively tried to create death and destruction in the creation on the theory that if everything died, including them, in their source-created suits, as well as the universal source connection channel, which is their spiritual home, they would shift into their self-made suits created from pseudocode and have the creation to themselves to build in it a fabricated pseudocode reality. They don't realize that if what they have wished for were to occur, they would disintegrate and wouldn't be around to manipulate pseudocode to create another alternate reality. And then there is the criminal contingent. The criminal contingent is just interested in the black market of stolen source energies and in creating fragmentation to better harvest those who are unsuspecting. The annihilationists and the alternate universe contingent often align with them and promise them better harvesting while secretly setting up the conditions of ultimate death and destruction which will end all harvesting possibilities. The criminal contingent is often the group that does the dirty work of the annihilationists and the alternate universe contingent without realizing that they are digging their own grave. And then there is the good citizen contingent. The good citizen contingent says in their carefully observed religious traditions that they uphold the standards of the source, the creator. But in reality, they ignore direct source guidance and cleverly position themselves to stay out of the sights of the worst of the negativity by allowing them to do whatever they want in their communities while they look the other way. They're like the restaurant owner who allows the mafia to eat at the restaurant without paying any time they want. Those in the good citizen contingent are not above starting wars and using torture to maintain control over the masses. The more they act out the ruthless tactics of the negativity, even within their religious systems, the more they keep the negativity from poaching too directly on themselves personally. All of these various contingents have been accelerating the fragmentation of life itself in the creation and squandering the resources needed to sustain a manifest creation. It was their collective efforts that led to the next turning point. the crash of the co-created universe, which occurred in February of 2004. Now, the co-created universe was the model of the creation that beings voted on when they first assembled in the immaterial level of reality prior to the creation of the material level. It was a model that enabled them to work with the spiritual genetic code created by the Source to co-create a heaven way of life. The alternative model that was available at the time was the Source-created universe, where the Source alone works with code. In the Source-created universe, 100% of the heaven experience is possible because the Source can work with more complex code than manifest beings can work with, and therefore can create the conditions in which a more complex heaven experience is possible. In the co-created universe, only 8% of the heaven experience can be manifested due to the limited range of the code. Manifest beings require a simpler kind of code and a more mechanical creation in order to participate in the co-creation process. Despite the loss of the wider range of the heaven experience that was possible in the Source-created universe, beings opted for the co-created universe because they wanted to participate in the co-creation process. The Source willingly created for them the co-created universe, since the Source is impartial to which kind of creation is manifested, as long as it can yield heaven, which is the only kind of creation that the Source can support. When suits opted to disconnect from the Source, this ability to work with spiritual genetic code became a dangerous ability. Beings developed pseudocode, which was designed to create their own idea of a heaven way of life. This pseudocode controlled the spiritual level of reality, which then structured the physical level of reality. This is how the world of suffering that we live in today was created. Out of this pseudocode has come the cultural traditions that promote war, abuse, addiction, oppression, and all of the other social ills that we see today. The co-created universe operated from a limited supply of spiritual energy, which beings were supposed to conserve in order to enable the creation to be self-sustaining. Instead of living on the energies generated from the core energy units given to them by the Source, they began to consume the core energy units themselves. This destroyed them and led to the crash of 2004, when the energy supply that sustained the manifestation of the creation had been used up. Although I had been operating incognito in all of my previous lifetimes, and in this lifetime as well, my Source function at the unmanifest level asked me at this time to reveal my identity in order to provide leadership to the beings in the creation who were facing the annihilation of their world. I agreed, but knew of the danger that this entailed for me, given the antagonism of the negativity to the Source, and particularly to the work of the Source to counter their harvesting operation. I sent out a call to all beings in the creation to work with me in groups of 4 on the inner plane to generate material energy that I could use to ground miracles that would sustain the creation. The hardcore members of the negativity began their attack on me for stepping forward to send out the call. The annihilationists didn't want to preserve the creation, and neither did the members of the alternate universe contingent. The good citizen contingent, by which I mean most of the beings who live in denial of what is really happening on the spiritual level of reality and censor anything that is counter to their cultural stories about the nature of spiritual reality, just turned a deaf ear. Oddly enough, the criminal contingent, which consisted of the opportunists who were not above doing grievous harm to others, but who were really not as hardcore members of the negativity, were the ones who came forward to help. The criminal contingent realized that they had been duped by the annihilationists and the alternate universe contingent, that they were being used to destroy the very structure of the creation, and that if they didn't work with the Source to salvage the situation, they themselves would die. The criminal contingent is a group of beings who is very aware of the technical aspects of how energy works in the creation, and were advanced enough to see the truth about what was happening and step in to protect their own self-interests. These beings worked in groups of 4 and generated enough material energy for me to bring in the miracle of enough Source power to stabilize the creation while I shifted it out of the co-created universe model into the only other model of a creation that was possible at that time, which was the source-created universe model. Since there was no provision for a shift of this kind, the only energy that could be used to transition the creation in this way was the energy that I needed to maintain my source manifestation. I therefore allowed the spiritual manifestation in which I had been incarnating since the beginning of the creation to die, and the life energies of this manifestation to be used to make the transition. I then transitioned into another kind of source manifestation that was capable of transitioning the creation into the source-created universe and operating the source-created universe when it was fully established. This caused an extreme spiritual death and rebirth process that was exceedingly dangerous. It put the survival of my human suit at risk, particularly in the circumstances of the extreme attack by the negativity that occurred during the time of this transition. In this source drawing, I'm referencing a drawing shown to you earlier, which is the way that things were set up in the beginning of the creation, when I was running at 20% source power, which was the amount of power I needed to perform my function in the co-created universe, where I was designed to be a consultant to manifest beings who were supposed to be working harmoniously with me to build heaven in accordance with the source plan. This source manifestation was never designed to come into the world and overpower the beings and establish source control. Such an act, which many manifest beings have expected from the source, given what has been happening in the manifest world, would have violated the laws of life of the co-created universe and put all beings who are dependent on the structure of life sustained by these laws at risk. The source can't violate the essential structure of the creation once it has been created, without destroying the creation itself and causing the death of all beings. As you can see in this source drawing, my manifestation had to grow in size and run much more power as I prepared to transition the creation into the source-created universe model. I was running 20% source power in the co-created universe, and now I had to run 100% source power. My new source manifestation also is far larger because of its expanded range of responsibilities. In the source-created universe, the source does all of the code work that was formerly designed to be done by all beings working in harmony with the source. The source-created universe also provides a much wider range of the heaven experience, which means a lot more work for my implementation aspect. The source would, in the source-created universe as it was originally designed, not be incarnating in a physical form such as the human form in which I am now incarnate. In the source-created universe, I would operate from an energy form in a separate reality in the manifest world that was like my own heaven in the unmanifest level. Shifting from the co-created universe to the source-created universe midstream in the middle of this human life required my human form to adjust to running source power that it had not been created to run. This led to many technical complications in the adjustment to this higher voltage, which required me to withdraw from the fragmented energies of the world in order to generate the integrated energies that were needed to counter the accelerated levels of fragmentation that occurred during the transition because the creation lacked an adequate power supply. The negativity tried to abort the establishment of the source-created universe because it would instate a higher level of spiritual integration that would compromise their harvesting operation. I worked around the clock for years, countering incessant attack on every level. On May 28, 2011, on the eve of the final phase of the transition into the source-created universe, the negativity managed to break my connection to the universal source connection channel. When this happened, the channel began to disintegrate. Since the channel was the only spiritual space in which life could exist, this set up the conditions in which all of life, like the channel, could disintegrate. That brings us to another turning point. The transition into the source-created universe, which was completed on that same date, May 28, 2011. Despite the danger to the channel, I was able to complete the generation of the foundation of source love energies that I gave to all beings. These energies were the emergency supply of integrating source love energies that could enable them to achieve enough of a level of integration to understand the danger to themselves and their world, and to take action to follow the lead of the Source into the very different terrain of the Source-created universe. With this gift of Source love energies, I completed my part of the work of establishing the Source-created universe and providing beings with the energies to transition into it. It was the culminating moment of 7.5 years of very intense and unrelenting work. Given the crisis with the Source Connection channel, I called on all beings in the creation to use the foundation of Source love energies to help them to produce enough material energy to ground a miracle that would relink the channel so it would not continue to disintegrate. The channel was essential to the existence of the Source-created universe, which relied on the energies that the channel stored for the maintenance of life in the manifest world. Instead of responding to the call of the Source, most beings began to do what they've always done, which is to attach to and consume anything that made them feel good without regard to the impact on themselves or others of this self-indulgence. Those who tried to help were outnumbered by those who refused to help. As a result of their actions, the creation reached another turning point. This was the crash of the Universal Source Connection channel, which occurred that same day, May 28, 2011. After the disintegration of the Source Connection channel, beings were floating like islands in the void, which is a place of no life. They survived only because of the foundation of Source love energies that provided a little bit of Source energy that kept them from fragmenting to the point of complete disintegration. Those who were most fragmented, represented by the darker spheres in the Source drawing, were most in jeopardy. The loss of the Source Connection channel was more than the loss of a spiritual habitat. It was the loss of the gift of life. The gift of life gave each being a basic supply of life energies that ensured their survival life after life. This energy supply was stored in the channel. Without this, every being must now work every day to supply the material energies for the life energies that they need to continue to stay alive. There is no longer any guarantee of sustaining life energies for this life or for future lifetimes. This means that no continuation of an incarnation after this current incarnation is guaranteed. A being must amass enough material energy to enable the Source to ground the miracle of their future incarnations. If they fail to do this, this incarnation will be their last. The gift of life also gave each being an individual life plan that gave them all of the spiritual genetic code that they needed to have a made-in-heaven life, with all of the resources and events staged to enable them to experience the highest level of heaven in their life. While beings largely ignored this life plan, many were held on track with it to some degree and kept out of harm's way if they chose to give their energies to manifesting this blessed life. The life code was stored in the channel. Without the channel, a being must now generate the material energy for the Source to remake the code. Through a major miracle, this is now possible. But it is not without a heavy output of effort on the part of the being to provide the amount of material energy needed to remake the life code. The gift of life also included individualized Source guidance on the inner plane for every being throughout every moment of their existence, including their transition between lifetimes. The channel provided the energy for this kind of Source support. Without this kind of Source support, I've created the construction site of heaven, where beings can receive indirect Source guidance through the beings who work with them at the construction site. It is not the same as living in the direct presence of the Source and receiving the individualized Source care that was possible before, but it does keep the lines of communication open between the beings and the Source. I also send out general Source communications when there is enough material energy available to ground them. This amount of support in no way resembles the intense and eternal Source support that was possible when the channel was in existence. After the colossal disaster of the disintegration of the channel, I worked to send Source communications to beings throughout the creation that enabled them to start generating material energy through supporting my work to help rebuild the creation. Through this correct exchange, they began to earn the life energies that would prevent the loss of their incarnations. Many heard the call of the Source and rallied. The hardcore negativity did not, and fell to preying on those who were so weakened by the lack of the sustaining energies of the channel that they were easier prey. Through many harrowing transitions, which I will not describe here, but which I have described in the Source communication entitled Surviving the Crash of the Source Connection Channel, I was able to keep life in the manifest world going until I could establish a new model of the creation. And that brings us to the next turning point. The creation of the Source Perfected Universe, which was created in July of 2011. In this model of the creation, the Source creates a perfected world, which is a world that has perfect spiritual integration. The beings can't prevent this level of integration from manifesting. Who survives to live in the Source Perfected Universe when it reaches its full level of manifestation depends on who works with the Source to perfect their suit so it recovers completely from the disease of fragmentation and achieves perfect integration. Every being, including the members of the negativity, is given full Source support to achieve this goal, but each being must choose to let go of the self-directed way of life that leads to fragmentation and to follow the lead of the Source to integrate their lives and build the heaven that the Source has designed for them. When the transition into the Source Perfected Universe was begun, the negativity stepped up its attacks, thinking that it would prevent this model of the creation from manifesting as well. Beings began to realize that the negativity was going to consume them for what energy they had left in them, and that they and all of life were in jeopardy of being extinguished. Finally, the creation reached yet another turning point. The core intelligence level of suits petitioned the Source for a Source solution. This occurred in July of 2011. The core level exists at an unconscious level of the suit. When the core level recognized the dire straits that the suit was in and agreed to follow the lead of the Source no matter how drastic a Source solution was needed to save their lives, a new era began in the creation. Since the beginning of the creation, most suits had been willfully disconnecting from the Source and wanting to evade any structure that the Source provided for them. Now the suits were aware enough of the unsustainability of their situation to accept the lead of the Source. Because they began to work to generate more material energy to do their part in the joint venture, the creation reached yet another turning point. The creation of individual Source connection channels, which occurred in July of 2011. With the material energy provided by the suits working to support the work of the Source, individual Source connection channels were created for each being who provided enough material energy for a channel to be built for them. These channels were not as sturdy or as replete with the energy as the universal Source connection channel had been, but they did provide a channel of Source energy within which a being could exist. It took them out of the void and put a protective barrier between them and the attacks of the negativity. This Source drawing depicts a being who is lacking in Source energies because he is not living in an individual Source connection channel. Here this being receives an individual Source connection channel, which is depicted by the white circle that surrounds the being. Once in the individual Source connection channel, the being was in a more integrated spiritual space conducive to making a better Source connection. This resulted in being able to receive an influx of life-sustaining Source energies. These Source energies are reflected in the presence of more Source light in the being. These Source energies could not be given, however, unless the being contributed to the work of the Source, thereby generating the material energy needed by the Source to sustain the individual channel. Some beings, once in the comfort of the individual Source connection channel, returned to the taking and not giving mode and discovered that their channel disintegrated and they were out in the void again. We then reached the next major turning point. The souls return to the unmanifest level and link from there to their manifest suits. This happened in the spring of 2012. Then the source returns to the unmanifest level and projects a presence in the manifest world. This also occurred in the spring of 2012. What this means can be best understood by these series of source drawings. I'm returning to a source drawing you saw earlier. This represents the larger manifestation of the implementation function running 100% source power that was needed when I was working to bring through the source-created universe. This drawing depicts the way it is now. The souls, represented by the blue spheres, have returned to the ring of intelligence around the source in the unmanifest level. They link to their suits, which are represented by the yellow circles. They can still express through their suits, but they are no longer tormented by the fragmented consciousness and behavior of the suits that were creating hell experiences for the souls, who are perfected intelligences, who have never wavered from their desire to experience only the heaven experience and to lead source-directed lives. The suits were the ones who overruled the souls, blocked the source connection that would have enabled the source to operate the suits on behalf of the souls, and took control of the destiny of the life. The white circle represents the source presence that is projected into the manifest world. The source is no longer resident in the manifest world in a holographic form as it was previously. It has withdrawn and projects in a representation of itself. Through this representation that links to my human form and can link to any energy form that I choose to take in my extended range, beings can still have a point of contact with the source. What these changes achieved was peace for the souls and for myself from the hell environment that the suits had created for themselves. It left the suits who had steadfastly tried to block the soul from manifesting on the stage of the life with the sobering realization that without the soul resident in the suit felt alone and fearful and lacked the higher vision that enabled it to rise above its most base desires. The suits on many levels, more than just the core level, began to appreciate the soul and want to cooperate with the source to enable the soul to link to the suit and to be the identity that was present on the stage of the life. This was a massive shift in the consciousness of suits who had previously worked to develop a story character identity for the stage of the life. There was a character that fit in with the cultural story of their social context. This story character was an entity composed of many fragments or fragment clusters. It was basically greedy, fearful, opportunistic, and loveless. It could, however, masquerade as loving and benevolent if this enabled it to position itself better in the cultural story and then work the situation to its advantage. The next turning point was the initiation of personal and universal power surges. They would provide beings with the source power needed to transform their suits, free them of the story character identities, and help them to become the heaven that they were created to be. This is the power that beings lost when they left the core of the source connection channel. Through the miracle of these power surges, they are now being given power to get themselves to safety and rebuild the foundation for a life that is heaven. Only in the source-perfected universe do the laws of life permit the source to provide this kind of power to beings. Let's take a look at the personal power surges that are now possible. Personal power surges provide individual beings with the source power to advance on their path to perfection. They are given at each major developmental stage in their evolution toward perfection. I provide personal heaven experience intensives to help individuals ride the wave of the power surge and benefit from the power that is given them to heal and to advance on their path. Let's take a look at the universal power surges. 4 universal power surges were created to provide beings with the source power to restore their connection to the source and to prepare their suits to begin working with the source to build heaven in their lives and in their world. The energy from these power surges came through from May through October 2012. It was stored and can be administered through a Universal Heaven Experience Intensive. Let's take a look at the first Universal Power Surge from May 26th through June 7th. Source power was sent to enable beings to become love in action by becoming what is needed to support the work of the Source, to stop the suffering and build a life and a world that is heaven. By becoming love in action, they can free themselves from the hell experience and enter into the heaven experience. Once in the heaven experience at an entry point level, they become eligible to enter into the materialization economy, where they can work toward manifesting everything that they need directly from the spiritual level of reality into the physical level of reality. The next turning point was the universal power surge from June 23rd through July 5th, 2012. This power surge made it possible for a standard of perfection to be dialed into the suits. This provides a baseline for the path toward perfect spiritual integration. This dial-in enables the suits to overcome the dial-in of the negativity, to continue fragmenting and spiraling down into death and destruction. The third universal power surge occurred between August 10th and August 25th, 2012. This power surge gave beings the source support to start the process of becoming the aspect of heaven that they were created to be. It enabled them to delete the developmental sequence that had been programmed into their suits by the negativity to grow up to be a story character in the cultural story that had been largely shaped by the influence of the negativity. It enabled the Source to provide them with a developmental sequence for becoming heaven instead. And finally, the fourth universal power surge occurred between September 15th and October 15th, 2012. This power surge provided the power for beings to get set up to build heaven and to build heaven. Let's take a closer look at what was provided for getting set up to build heaven. This part of the power surge provided the power for beings to receive the spiritual software needed to build a life that works and a world that works. Heaven agents equipped with this software are equipped to join me at the construction site of heaven. And let's take a look at building heaven. Part of the power coming from the power surge sustains the ongoing work of building heaven, where beings meet me at the construction site of heaven and learn through an apprenticeship model how to build the heaven of lives that work and a world that works. Now let's take a look at another turning point. The creation of an upgrade of the construction site of heaven, which occurred in October 2012. In this source drawing, the white sphere represents my manifestation and the yellow sphere represents the upgraded version of the construction site. I was just in the process of setting up the construction site when the negativity struck again, and we reached another turning point. The loss of the lifeline to the source and the individual source connection channels, which were lost in October 2012. In this source drawing, you can see the circle of love that was the original lifeline to the source. This transitioned into a tube after the collapse of the source connection channel and then was lost entirely in October 2012. The source had to terminate lifeline technology for all beings because too many beings were using the energies from the source that were coming through the lifeline in a self-directed way. They were trying to have their cake and eat it too by taking in source energies and trying to use them to jockey for the things of the world that they desired, instead of following the source guidance of the source to use these energies in a source-directed way that it would yield safety for them, for my manifestation, and a life that is heaven. This opened the door to the infiltration of the lifeline by the negativity. The only recourse that the source had was to shut down the lifeline, or it would be providing ammunition to the negativity, who would then try to attack the being with this additional power and attack my manifestation. After the lifelines were terminated, beings who are represented by the little spheres began to be drawn to the life-giving energies of the construction site, which is the yellow sphere. I explained to them how they could dock at the construction site and work to support the work of the source in order to generate material energy, which could then enable them to receive the life energies that would sustain them. After the end of the lifeline, docking at the construction site was the only way in which beings could receive such life energies. Once they docked, they began to return to a higher level of vibration and intelligence. Their souls could then express through the suits much more readily. In this source drawing, the blue sphere represents a being who is docked at the construction site with a soul manifesting more fully through the suit. Let's take a closer look at the construction site and how beings can work with it. You can enter the construction site of heaven on 2 levels, through your extended range or through your conscious range. Your extended range is the aspect of your spiritual consciousness that is normally outside of your conscious awareness. In the extended range, you can draw on the full range of spiritual advancement and skill sets of your spiritual energy body and your physical energy body that can draw on your knowledge across lifetimes rather than just what you have become aware of in a particular lifetime. Your conscious range has 2 levels. The preconscious is more like the subliminal mind. It is dimly conscious. Much spiritual knowledge is readily available to the suit at this level. The full conscious range requires that a being be fully cognizant of spiritual reality in their conscious mind. There are 16 gateways to the extended range aspect of the construction site. Where you enter depends on your level of spiritual advancement. At higher level gateways, you receive more spiritual power to do your work and can therefore build heaven with greater ease and with greater power. Here is a depiction of a being represented by the blue sphere entering into one of the extended range gateways. This being is entering into the second gateway, which is for heaven agents with very elementary levels of skill. Here the being is docking at the construction site through this gateway. He is now advanced in his skill sets and is moving into the third gateway where he can work at a more advanced level. Now he's reached the 16th gateway where he has maximum power to work to build heaven in his extended range. While working at the construction site in the extended range can help greatly since 90% of your life exists outside of your conscious range, it is only when a being works in both their extended range and in their conscious range that they can build heaven with enough power to survive the rapid changes of the source-perfected universe as it comes into full manifest form. This is a depiction of the one gateway to the conscious range aspect of the construction site. This gateway can be accessed online through the Miracle School website, and for beings outside of the Earth or those on the Earth who are unable to access the Internet, it can be accessed through a spiritual link that I provide to those beings who are qualified to work at this level. This is a being beginning to enter through the conscious range gateway. As he enters in and begins to contribute to the work, he can advance to other parts of the construction site. He goes to the part of the site where he is most needed. When you enter through the conscious range gateway, you begin working with this graphic of the Universal Heaven Project, which resides like a dial in the construction site. As you are drawn into the graphic, you enter into different parts of the construction site and can do your work on whatever project you are guided to work on at the time. Those who enter through the conscious range gateway are triggered by the graphic to enter into either autopilot mode or adventure mode. In autopilot mode, even the novice can accomplish the miraculous. They simply ask to become what is needed, and the source works through their suits, playing them like an instrument to produce the perfect performance that enables their suit to accomplish what it would never be able to accomplish through relying only on its own skill sets and conscious understandings. The work happens so fast that the conscious mind may not be able to understand what is happening. But because the heaven agent is consciously participating by watching what part of the graphic they are drawn to, they give the power of the conscious range to the work, and the work becomes many times more powerful than the work done through the extended range gateways. In adventure mode, you follow the clues given to you by the source. In adventure mode, the work is more conscious and you draw on your skill sets in a very mindful manner. This level of the work adds to the understanding of the heaven agent and builds a structure of heaven agent skills that are essential to building certain aspects of heaven. Together, the work in autopilot mode and in adventure mode enable a heaven agent to check into the construction site and build heaven in their life and world in a very powerful way. Those entering the construction site through the conscious range gateway are given twice the amount of power given to those entering only through the extended range gateways. They are also given miracles to work with, such as the autopilot miracle, that are only available through the conscious range gateway. After the work is complete, the Heaven Agent communicates their experiences to me through the Heaven Agent to Source Communication Center online, and I review their work and see what part it is playing in the overall work of building heaven. I then post the communication, if it should be seen by other Heaven Agents working at the construction site, and they follow the action of their fellow Heaven Agent. In this way, they can understand and support the work of the Heaven Agent team and build heaven together more efficiently. I may also post the source perspective on the work that was done to help the Heaven Agent and others on the team to better understand how to work at the construction site and where we are in the project. I also post information about the work of the source that I'm doing and the source perspective on what is going on in the creation as a whole, so that all who are working at the construction site can follow the action more precisely. Since the conscious range aspect of the construction site can be accessed by beings throughout the creation, I'm working with and addressing Heaven Agents throughout the universal community and also posting translations of the communications that I receive from them in the universal language of Soul Talk. In this way, I facilitate the teamwork of Heaven Agents throughout the creation, working together to build a love-based universal community. Heaven Agents working with me at the construction site meet periodically via teleconference to discuss what is happening at the construction site and to work with greater power as a team at that time. This is where Heaven Agents learn more about how to work with a source through an apprenticeship model, learning as they work alongside me at the construction site. They also have an opportunity to learn from their fellow Heaven Agents. Heaven Agents coming in from the Soul Talk Network communicate their input, which I translate for the benefit of those coming in over the conference line. Through working alongside me at the construction site, you have an opportunity to see a more integrated picture of reality and to work on perfecting your levels of integration. You are also at the forefront of bringing in the miracles that cure the disease of fragmentation and free the world of the negative spiritual structures that have been built on the foundation of a fragmented picture of reality. You also have an opportunity to develop the love connection through working with me and getting to know the source and how it thinks and operates in the manifest world. This very personal connection will stand you in good terms when, after this current life, I am no longer manifesting in a physical form such as my human form, and you will need to have an in-depth understanding of the source in order to preserve your source connection. This brings us to another set of turning points, which is a series of vibrational shifts. The manifest world, without the full manifestation of the source in it, began to sink to lower levels of vibration, since the beings in the manifest world were generating low vibrational energies that were no longer being counteracted by a manifestation of the source in their midst. This descent into lower vibrations was accelerating the rate of fragmentation. To counteract the descent into lower vibrations and to establish the high vibrational platform upon which heaven can be built, the Source initiated 4 universal vibrational shifts. I've described these vibrational shifts in some detail in the Source communication entitled The Promise and Peril of 2012 and 2013. I will briefly sketch an outline of what they are here, since they are major turning points in the history of the joint venture with the Source. Let's take a look at the 4 vibrational shifts. Each vibrational shift lifts the support field upon which the creation rests to a higher level of vibration. At higher levels of vibration, greater levels of spiritual integration are possible. This creates the conditions in which Source love, which only manifests in a highly integrated field of energy, can manifest. When Source love manifests abundantly, spiritual integration can reach its full level of expression. In the Source-perfected universe, only those suits that achieve perfect integration will survive. There is no longer any energy from the universal Source connection channel to sustain suits that are fragmented. Therefore, lifting the platform of life to the right vibrational level is necessary if the creation and the beings in the creation are to survive. Let's take a look at the timing on the 4 vibrational shifts. As of this recording, the first 3 shifts have already occurred. They occurred on November 28, 2012, December 12, 2012, and December 26, 2012. The next vibrational shift will occur on August 8, 2013. Those who are more spiritually integrated experience these shifts to higher levels of vibration as exhilarating. Those who are more spiritually fragmented are at risk. In the vibrational shifts that have already happened, some suits have disintegrated at a spiritual level, and the souls have become unlinked. This is the spiritual death of the soul in the manifest world. The physical body has generally remained alive but badly fragmented and in danger of disintegrating into disease and death. I've been able to link some souls back to their suits if their suits had been trying, prior to the shift, to recover and had stored up the amount of material energy that I needed to repair the suit and relink the soul. All of the suits are docking at the construction site and supporting the work of the Source. Through this exchange in the extended range, they are generating material energy, which I am using to help them to recover from the disease of fragmentation, so they can receive either a new soul or be relinked to their former soul. So let's take a closer look at each of these vibrational shifts. Let's take a look at the vibrational shift of November 28, 2012. In the vibrational shift of November 28th, less than 1% of the suits disintegrated. These were the ones who had extensive fragmentation in their core, the central intelligence unit of the suit. 20% of the souls were able to be relinked. 80% of the suits remain empty, without a soul. They are working at the construction site to generate the material energy to repair their damaged core, so they can have a new soul or be relinked to their former soul. Now let's have a look at the vibrational shift of December 12, 2012. In the vibrational shift of December 12th, 19% of the suits disintegrated. Those who had survived had to have enough spiritual integration to understand Source truth, rather than cling to the untruths or partial truths of their cultural stories. 10% of the souls have been relinked. The physical body that remains lacks a spiritual energy body and a physical energy body. The work at the construction site will have to be much more intense to provide the Source with enough material energy to replace these vital parts of the manifestation. Without them, the life can't continue after death. What survives the death is the soul and the spiritual energy body and the physical energy body. If these are missing, there is nothing to continue on in future lifetimes. So this brings us to another turning point. The creation of the Emergency Anti-Fragmentation Facility on the inner plane, which was built in December 2012. Just before the vibrational shift of December 26th, I had built an emergency care facility on the inner plane to help beings survive the vibrational shift. This was made possible by the contribution of material energy by a heaven agent. In this emergency anti-fragmentation care facility, beings enter into a perfectly integrated field of intelligence that helps to stop the acceleration of the disease of fragmentation. Unfortunately, it is not well enough funded by material energy to provide those in the facility with all the care they need to recover from the disease of fragmentation, or to sustain them in the facility for more than a very limited period of time. But during the vibrational shift of December 26th, it saved countless lives. So let's take a closer look at the vibrational shift that occurred on the 26th. Those who survived this vibrational shift had to have achieved a level of integrated understanding that enabled them to grasp the fact that they have to support the work of the Source if they want to sustain their individual lives and contribute to building a sustainable world. They also had to be actively engaged in supporting the work of the Source on the inner and outer planes. This could be done either indirectly through responding to inner plane Source requests or directly through responding to my outer plane Source requests. Beings responded readily to the Source directive to seek refuge in the inner plane emergency anti-fragmentation facility that I had just completed prior to the shift. Although many were very fragmented, in the integrated field of the facility they were able to keep from disintegrating while they adjusted to the higher vibration. Now let's take a look at the vibrational shift that's upcoming as of the time of this recording that will occur on August 8th, 2013. Those who survive this vibrational shift will be those who are following Source guidance to transition out of the story culture that breeds fragmentation into the culture of heaven that supports integration. They will be willing to and actively engaged in building the heaven of lives that work and a world that works. They will be joining forces with other heaven agents to build a global and universal community that is Source-connected and dedicated to building the heaven of total abundance, perfect health, love-based relationships, life purpose fulfillment, and the love connection with the Source. This vibrational shift will not leave any room for fence-sitting. Beings who survive will be those who release from their attachment to the fragmented way of life and embrace the integrated way of life. Now let's shift gears from looking at the history of the joint venture to looking at where we are now. In this section of the Source communication, I will provide you with information on the Universal Ultimate Spiritual Healing Program that the Source has created to help beings to recover from the disease of fragmentation and to develop the perfect integration that will enable them to realize their dream of experiencing a life that is heaven in the manifest world. Let's turn our attention to the Source solution to the state of the creation, which is the creation of the Source perfected universe, and within this model of the creation, the Ultimate Spiritual Healing Program. The Ultimate Spiritual Healing Program was created by the Source to help beings recover from the disease of fragmentation and achieve perfect integration by building the heaven of lives that work and a world that works. Ultimate spiritual healing is not a passive process like going to the doctor for a treatment. Beings heal by thinking through what has gone wrong and working with the Source to build an integrated picture of reality, and from it an integrated way of life which will enable their suits to heal. It is important to note that contrary to many cultural beliefs that the Source is a vindictive intelligence that desires to punish those who have created trouble in the world, is the Source truth that the Source is love and only wishes that all beings, however badly they have become diseased, recover and enjoy perfect health and a life that is heaven. Fragmentation is a disease that causes a lack of intelligence that leads suits to make decisions that are destructive to themselves and to others. Punishment only furthers fear and anger and despair, which increases fragmentation. Only a return to an integrated picture of reality and to an integrated field of high vibrational energy can enable a being to recover their spiritual intelligence and realize that life is about love and about the celebration of the love connection with the Source. When this primary love is celebrated, then Source love flows through the being, restoring spiritual integration. It then flows through the being into the world, restoring integration in the world community. Through beings embracing the love connection with the Source, They will heal themselves and their world, and they will live the heaven experience in their everyday lives. Now let's take a closer look at how to achieve ultimate spiritual healing in your life and in the world. It begins by recognizing that the disease of fragmentation began with a decision by your suit against the wishes of you, the soul, to disconnect from the source and to lead a self-directed life, taking what it desired without regard to the impact it would have on you or on the world community. You need to make an executive-level decision as the soul to overrule the decision of the suit and to reconnect with the source, to enter into source care and allow the source to guide you step by step on the path to ultimate spiritual healing. You need to be prepared to work closely with the source to heal your suit of the fragmented picture of reality that is the causal force behind the disease of fragmentation. Your suit is like a child who doesn't know the full implications of its actions. You, the soul, are a perfected intelligence. You must provide the leadership needed to guide your suit to safety. Follow the lead of the source to build for your suit an integrated picture of reality from which your suit can build an integrated way of life. You need to be aware that your suit may defend its beliefs and way of life, since this is all that it knows. But you as the soul must be prepared to take charge and work with the source to guide your suit out of its misguided ways and into an integrated picture of reality from which it can build an integrated way of life that supports the process of becoming spiritually integrated. Let's take a look at how it is possible to achieve perfect integration in your life and in your world. You need to begin by understanding the process of integration. You need to integrate your suit's picture of reality, your suit or manifestation, and your way of life. You need to understand how to heal your suit's picture of reality. You need to return to the basic vision of an integrated life and integrated world that is graphically depicted in this drawing of the Universal Heaven Project. You need to understand how, through working on the love connection with the Source, you are able to achieve an inner heaven experience that enables you to work on the other 4 projects that yield total abundance, perfect health, love-based relationships, and life purpose fulfillment. And that from building heaven in these projects on the outer plane, you can achieve the outer plane heaven experience. And finally, that through building the heaven experience in your inner life and in your outer life, you can transcend the experiences of your suit in the material world and experience the sublime heaven experience of your soul, who has returned to the bliss of the unmanifest level of reality. This is how you experience the best of both worlds and achieve the ultimate heaven experience. How you work to build the heaven of an integrated life is through joining in the work that I do at the construction site of heaven. While joining in through your extended range, which is often outside of your conscious awareness, is helpful, it is only when you choose to train with me in the Miracle School and join in the work of the conscious range aspect of the construction site that you really begin to build an integrated life. It takes understanding who you are as a unique spiritual being, understanding your spiritual history, understanding your mission in this life, and learning the skill sets of a heaven agent to really travel the path to ultimate spiritual healing. It also takes actively working to build heaven in your personal life and in the world. Let's take a closer look at how you build heaven in your personal life. On the most basic level, you begin by understanding the technical side of your manifestation, which includes your suit and the energy fields surrounding your suit. You need to be able to track your integration levels in your manifestation to know how you're doing on your path to perfect integration. All manifestations consist of at least 6 concentric circles of energy. The outermost circle is the individual support field, This is your counterpart of the universal support field that is being lifted to higher vibrational levels in the 4 universal vibrational shifts. The innermost circle is the core of the manifestation. The second ring from the middle contains all of a being's miracle-based abilities and stored skill sets. If fragmentation sets in the support field, it undermines the spiritual integrity of all of the other levels of the manifestation. These 6 concentric levels of your manifestation must sustain a state of perfect spiritual integration if your suit is to survive as the source-perfected universe comes into a fully manifest form. The 4 vibrational shifts are the most abrupt shifts to a baseline of integration that is required to begin the serious work of building heaven, but after that, increasing levels of spiritual integration will be required for suits to continue to sustain themselves in the source-perfected universe. It is possible to assess your level of integration in all of these levels of your manifestation and to determine what is at risk. It is then possible to receive specific source support to repair the damage. Fragmentation is also a problem because the manifestation is a transformer that transforms source-given energies into material energy that is then exchanged with the source for life energies that sustain the manifestation. Here is a depiction of the 6 concentric circles forming a transformer shape which is like a blunt-nosed cone. The source energies depicted here by the white sphere power up the material energy factory, which, if integrated, produces material energy, which is the yellow energy coming out of the top of the transformer. Fragmentation destroys the integrity of the material energy factory. Because of the disease of fragmentation, beings on the earth produce less than 1% of the amount of material energy that they were designed to produce. Without the ability to produce material energy at all, a being is spiritually bankrupt. They can't exchange with the source for the resources that they need, and the source can't ground the resources without their material energy, because the source doesn't generate material energy. Material beings need to produce high-grade material energy if they want to exchange with the source for the miracles that produce a miracle-based way of life. There are 14 grades of material energy. Level 14 is the highest grade, and that's only produced when a being truly loves the source and is giving to the work of the source without a thought of return for themselves. Those beings that are seeking to directly attract to themselves what they desire using spiritual technologies that don't involve the source don't have what it takes to manifest what they want if they lack material energy. This is why some people attempt to use these spiritual technologies and do attract what they want, and others fail despite applying the same techniques. But the fatal flaw in self-directed technologies for manifestation is that they promote fragmentation. Only when the being draws the perfection of an integrated outcome that is source-designed do they truly benefit from what they manifest. Those who draw a material resource or social outcome that they have designed contribute to the fragmented life that such small picture visualizations create. They hasten their levels of fragmentation even while looking like they're succeeding with their spiritual technologies. The bottom line is that it takes material energy to manifest anything, and that those who are highly fragmented have broken material energy factories and can't produce what it takes to survive on any terms. Now let's take a look at what is involved in building the heaven of an integrated way of life. The key to integrating your manifestation on all 6 levels is building a source-connected way of life that supports spiritual integration. You need to build this in your personal life and in the world. Working at the construction site on the 5 projects of the Universal Heaven Project is the key to building this integrated way of life. Training in how to work at the construction site is provided to you by the Source through the Miracle School, which teaches beings throughout the creation. On the Earth, the Miracle School can be accessed through online training, by webinar, by phone or teleconference, or by working with me in person in the Ultimate Spiritual Healing Center in Seattle, Washington, in the United States, or in intensives in Maui, Hawaii. Those coming into work with me from other parts of the creation access my help through the Soul Talk network that enables us to converse in the universal language of Soul Talk that is common to all forms of life throughout the creation. Now let's take a look at what's involved in entering into the Universal Ultimate Spiritual Healing Program. At this point in time, every suit that has survived the first 3 vibrational shifts is already in the extended range of the Universal Ultimate Spiritual Healing Program. They are in source care and are progressing in their work at the construction site. What suits need, however, is to enter into the conscious range aspect of the Ultimate Spiritual Healing Program that enables their conscious minds to evolve out of the fragmented picture of reality into the integrated picture of reality. I've made it possible for all beings to follow a 6-step process for requesting admission into the Conscious Range Ultimate Spiritual Healing Program. For those on the earth, information regarding the 6-step process can be accessed at www.themiracleschool.net/6-step process. Now let's take a look at what it means to join in the work of the Source. When you join in the work of the Source, you travel the path to ultimate spiritual healing. The work of the Source is to give suits a chance to recover from the disease of fragmentation that has almost cost them their lives, and to give them the Source support to achieve perfect integration, which will be necessary as the Source-perfected universe reaches its full level of manifestation. In order to achieve perfect integration, all suits must let go of their attachment to the things that they desire and must follow the lead of the Source on the path to ultimate spiritual healing. As they open to the miracles of the Source, they will find that the heaven that they can build will be far better than anything they could have secured for themselves. When you join in the work of the Source, you work with the Source to build a universal community that is founded on the love connection with the Source. From this solid base, the universal community can build a miracle-based way of life that is of heaven. Joining in the work of the Source also means understanding what it takes to build heaven. It takes direct source work, which is 70% of the project. Direct source work is needed for creating and bringing into the manifest world the miracles that make it possible for life to be heaven, and for training and working with heaven agents throughout the creation to build a source-connected universal community that is abundant, disease-free, love-based, and that nurtures all of its own. It also means providing the heaven agent work, which is 30% of the project. This means becoming what is needed to support the work of the Source, to provide the heaven agent work and the material resources that are needed. As a heaven agent asks to become what is needed, they let go of their ideas of how to get things done or what skill sets they have to draw on, and they become flexible. The Source can then work through the instrument of their suit to enable them to do the heaven agent work that is needed, which is when they use their unique miracle-based abilities to help with the project. The Source also makes it possible for them to access the material resources that enable them to contribute to the work that I do as the aspect of the Source working on the ground in their world to help them build heaven. As they ask to become what is needed, they become alerted to what they can do to generate the material resources needed, even if they don't already have them readily accessible. I know that many assume that the Source has everything that is needed and should provide all of the work and all of the material resources to save the world. This is not in keeping with the laws governing the joint venture of the Source with the manifest beings. The Source can and will do only what is in keeping with its part of the joint venture. If manifest beings want the Source to work in their midst and secure for them what only direct Source work can secure, they have to step forward and supply the material resources and heaven agent work that is needed to get the job done. This is the essential concept that the members of the prototype communities understood that enabled them to stop waiting to be saved and to get busy generating the material energy that enabled the source to land the miracles that stopped the suffering in their lives and manifested the heaven of a miracle-based way of life. To this day, they devote their workday to generating the material energy that enables me to do the 70% of the work that I alone can do to sustain their heaven way of life. They don't stint on providing correctly for what I will need because they know that if they don't provide, they may come to a time when I'm prepared to deliver miracles that are necessary to sustain their way of life, and there's no material energy to ground the miracles. They don't want to leave any loopholes open to the negativity to get back into their community, so they look ahead and follow source guidance to make sure that they are providing me with all of the material energy that will be needed to ground the miracles of source power, which enable me to do the direct source work. When others outside of the prototype communities grasp the importance of this strategy to their overall success in transitioning out of the suffering of their current way of life into the heaven of a miracle-based way of life, they will also begin to support the work of the Source in as careful a manner. In the article entitled Supporting the Work of the Source, I outline the current projects that are needing material energy from heaven agents. I also explain how this material energy can be supplied through either an energy exchange, which requires the correct use of the material energy factory of the suit, or through a financial exchange, which can transfer the material energy of work power that is generated when people work to earn money. As long as the material energy is provided, I can use it to ground source power to do my direct source work. It is up to the heaven agents in the global and universal community to come forward to provide the material energy that is needed. This will enable us to get our joint venture back on track and begin to rapidly travel in the footsteps of the prototype communities and build a way of life that is of heaven. Joining in the work of the Source also means understanding how to support the work of the Source. Information about the miracle-based training and spiritual equipment that is needed to do heaven agent work is available in the free ebook, The Owner's Manual for Your Suit, which you will find at www.themiracleschool.net/owner's manual. Information about the material resources needed for the work of the Source is available at www.themiracleschool.net/supporting the work of the Source. To join in the work of the Source, request admission into the Ultimate Spiritual Healing Program. When you are granted admission into the program, you enter into an integrated field of energy that protects you while you heal from the disease of fragmentation and achieve spiritual integration. You enter into source care 24/7. An individualized plan is generated for you by the Source to guide you step by step on your path to ultimate spiritual healing. You receive Source guidance emails that help you know what is next on your path. The Source activates the gateway to Source Support Miracle for you to reflect what miracles of Source support are in your individualized plan. You can go there and find what has already been created for you, or request a miracle that is in your plan that has yet to be created. You can find a link to the Gateway to Source Support on the Miracle School website. If you are observing the standard of heaven, you are eligible to enter into the work at the Conscious Range Gateway of the construction site of heaven. Here you can work with me and with fellow heaven agents to build heaven in your life and world. You become a member of the Global and Universal Heaven Agent Network, which is the core unit of heaven agents. This core unit is at the forefront of the Universal Heaven Project. Heaven agents in the network learn how to support one another and build a community that is source-directed and free of the ills that beset communities that are built on a cultural story. You are eligible to work with me in ultimate spiritual healing centers. In these centers, you experience a spiritual space of perfect integration. These centers can be accessed through online stations that connect you to spiritual spaces where an aspect of my manifestation in my extended range works with you directly in a spiritual space that is perfectly integrated and replete with the miracles that enable you to advance rapidly. These stations make connecting to source support and perfection accessible to you anywhere in your life at any time. They can be easily accessed by smartphones, an iPad, or your computer. They bring an experience of heaven to heaven agents throughout our global community. Ultimate Spiritual Healing Centers can be accessed in their full power in the Ultimate Spiritual Healing Center in Seattle, Washington, in the United States. Here, perfection is tangible on the outer plane. In an outer plane station, you can sit in a chair that is a miracle intelligence, working intelligently with you. You can look at a source drawing on the wall and be transported into the world of the source. You can sip tea which has been transformed into heaven tea, and enjoy the verdant tropical environment that is replete with miracles of every sort. All of the furnishings, from the carpet to the paint on the walls to the furniture and the flower arrangements, are all miracle intelligences that surround you with a heaven of source perfection. In this kind of integrated environment, your suit is able to grasp the beauty of what a world that is heaven can be. It is here that you are able to work safely in source care to take whatever steps you need to take to build this kind of world in your personal life and in your world. It is here also that groups of heaven agents gather to work on projects together to pioneer a heaven way of life, following source guidance to manifest the culture of heaven that the source has created, which will enable people to transition out of the story culture that engenders fragmentation into a culture that promotes integration and the true happiness that comes from living a source-guided, integrated way of life. Heaven agents seek the support of these ultimate spiritual healing centers online and in Seattle because it is only in this protected and transformative space that they can receive miracles that can't land anywhere else because they require the highly integrated field of energy of an ultimate spiritual healing center. It is also here that they can think outside the box created by the negativity and begin to pioneer a new way of life that is of heaven. Once you're in the Ultimate Spiritual Healing Program, you're eligible to work with me in personal and universal heaven experience intensives, where you can benefit from the power surges that provide you with the source power you will need to advance. I can work with you in person in an Ultimate Spiritual Healing Center or at a distance. You can gain entry through a Universal Heaven Experience Intensive into the place of ultimate spiritual healing where heaven is being built. Through evolving from the entry point in this space to the highest level, you arrive at a spiritual space that is the equivalent of the core of the Universal Source Connection channel, only it is far more refined and exquisite, since it is a space of absolute perfection, a creation of the Source perfected universe. You also gain access to miracle-based training that is only available to those who are in the program and committed to following in the footsteps of the prototype communities and building a life and a world that is of heaven. Through this individualized training, you learn how to find your place in the heaven that is being built for those who choose to perfect their suits and develop the love connection with the Source. You have the opportunity to work with the Source in this my final incarnation in the manifest world. Through working alongside me at the construction site of heaven, you will come to understand the logic of the Source, the way in which the Source works to fix what has been damaged and to build in its place the perfection that is heaven. In this way, you will prepare yourself to continue to build heaven in all of your subsequent lifetimes, when your knowledge of how the Source works will enable you to build from life to life an ever-expanding experience of heaven. If you understand the Source, you will be able to develop the love connection, which will be your sole point of connection with the Source once the Source-perfected universe has reached its final state of manifestation. In conclusion, to join in the work of the Source, complete the 6-step process to request admission into the Ultimate Spiritual Healing Program. To do this, go to www.themiracleschool.net/6-step process. I look forward to welcoming you into the work of the Source and working alongside you to build the heaven that your life and all of life was meant to be.